Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yahowah Radio. It's my pleasure to be here both with Kirk and Dee. Here I am coughing again. I feel much better. I had the flu the last time we did this show. I'm over the flu, but the sinus part of the flu and its irritation of the throat continues. Fellas, we're going to start, and ladies, we're going to start talking a little bit about the news. There was a company that's been in the news here a lot. Not nearly as much as it should be because, well, they've bought influence in the media and academia and politics and in the government. The company was called FTX, not to be confused with FDX. FDX is Federal Express. FTX. It was a crypto exchange. And in addition to creating this marketplace where you could buy and sell cryptocurrencies, it also had their own cryptocurrency like Bitcoin that they created out of thin air and pretended like it had value and used this cryptocurrency that had absolutely no backing to buy things. And this company donated, I think it's over $1 billion to the Democratic Party, $25 million to the Republican Party. They played both sides. And one morning, it was worth $32 billion. 24 hours later, Chapter 11, and completely bankrupt.
Wow.
That is that is the world that we're entering, and I wanted to share that with you because there are a number of road markers, I would say, on the way to financial oblivion for the United States and the West. And I've talked about most of these at considerable length on this show and on the preceding shows, going back to Shattering Myths and all the way through Yada Yahowah Radio for, better part of now 20 years. So this is not new information. It's just that in the last 2 to 4 years, things have accelerated to the point that we could collapse in 24 hours. You could go to bed one night and the world is as, well, you know it now. Of course, the world changed radically with COVID-19. We never thought that it could change that radically one day to the next, and it did. This change will make COVID-19 look like you stubbed your big toe. This change will be to complete economic collapse and anarchy. Here are the issues. And I'm not sharing this to scare anybody. I'm not sharing this to pretend like I'm a prophet or that I'm an economic expert. I'm none of those things.
Scares me.
But I do read a lot. I share a lot. And I'm reasonably good at putting the pieces together. And it appears that I have this one right. It all begins when the United States decided to go off the gold standard and create a fiat currency with a central bank, and nation after nation follow suit. A fiat currency is a currency that's not backed by an asset, but instead is a debt instrument. So it is actually a liability. And when the United States did that, there really was no chance of it succeeding because there's no controls, no restraints on it at all. And it is a religious instrument. The moment people lose faith in it, it ceases to have any merit at all. The problem has been that because it's a fiat currency, the United States has gone into grotesque government spending at a monumentally accelerated rate under George W. Bush, then again beginning under Ronald Reagan as he tried to build the Navy of all navies, and exacerbated tremendously under Obama, also under both of the Bushes. And then Trump with his $4 billion COVID recovery plan to try to recover from the draconian effect that his lockdowns had on the economy. and yet he was a spiker compared to what Weekend at Bernie's has done with the progressives in charge. So we have destroyed the value of our currency by creating the illusion of money, and the United States has been able to do that through quantitative easing, which is to say we create the illusion of money, we put it on the account of the Federal Reserve and pretend like the Federal Reserve actually had the money that it's lending to the United States, because no one wants our T-bills anymore. We can't sell them, so we create the illusion that this is an asset. The reason we're able to do that is because of a deal that Henry Kissinger worked out. 1974, I think, was the year. And the Saudi Arabia was leading a concept called OPEC. And they wanted the United States to support the concept of this monopoly that held a gun to the world. And so what we did is we told Saudi Arabia they could nationalize all of the oil production, which means take it over as a family, the Saud family, that they could rest assured that the United States would protect them. That's the reason why the United States got involved in the first Iraq War. We had a pledge to protect with our military Saudi Arabia. And the deal we made was that we will protect you, we will have your back, and you can go ahead and form OPEC. We don't care what it does to our economy, our citizens, or the world's citizens. We only want one thing from you, an ironclad commitment that you will only trade oil for dollars.
US dollars.
So as the world needs your oil, they will have to buy dollars to buy that oil. That was the deal we made. And after World War II, and from that moment on, the United States became what was called the reserve currency of the world. If you wanted to buy an exported product, it was monetized in dollars, and you had to have dollars. So that every nation in the world, every large corporation, had to have a stash of dollars, which made dollars valuable. And what I have said for years now, that because of the belligerence of the United States and because of the fact that the United States is devaluing their currency at an astonishing rate with deficit spending, that a time will come when the dollar is no longer the reserve currency of the world. Well, two things have happened, actually three things have happened to make that reality inevitable. Absolutely inevitable. I cannot tell you if this will happen next week, next month, next year, or in the next 5 years. But it is absolutely going to happen. The things that have occurred is the first is the largest infrastructure investment in the planet's history. The Chinese formed an initiative with 47 countries, representing 90% of the world's population. It's their Belt Road plan, where they are linking all of the world, well, 90% of the population of the world, with China and with one another for economic trade through land routes, rail routes, truck routes, shipping lanes, and all of it bypasses Western Europe and the United States. It was specifically designed to include countries like Russia and Iran and Pakistan, even South America through the shipping lanes, India. And it is the largest infrastructure project in the history of the world. And it takes 90% of the world and it isolates it from the United States and from Europe, and therefore from those economies. So while not one of those economies could topple the U.S. economy independently, collectively, they overwhelm it. That was not the last shoe to drop. There have been two more. The next one is there's an alliance of countries Brazil is one of those countries. India is one of those countries. Iran is another. China and Russia are members. And there are countries joining every day. Soon, every country in this part of OPEC will be part of it. Nigeria, I think, is part of as an OPEC country. It's called BRIC, B-R-I-C. And BRIC, I think it's Brazil was one of the founding countries. India is one of the founding countries. Russia and China. So BRIC. Their intent, their primary intent, is to get around having to use dollars as the world's reserve currency. They want to buy oil and sell oil, as well as natural gas, as well as other commodities, and rubles, and Chinese yuan, and the basic currencies of those countries. It was made, is no longer in force. And we will wake up one day very soon where we're going to have to face that music. And it was accelerated worldwide by America's last two withdrawals. The way we left Vietnam, and worse, the way we left Afghanistan. Now, we never should have been in Vietnam. We never should have been in Afghanistan. And I spoke out against both wars at the time we were invading and all the way through, and explained why these were lose-lose games, where in both situations we were making bad situations worse, and there was no hope for any other outcome. Well, because of the way we left, the world is questioning, why would anyone trust America? And it got much worse when the United States came up with the pretext to draw Russia into war with Ukraine. And most of the world knows what, at least outside of Europe and the United States, knows what was done, that we threatened to militarize Ukraine along the Russian border, and the Russians said, no, you can't do that. Our vital interests, you having a military presence in the Ukraine. And so once we drew them into that war, and we tried to draw them into the war back in 2013, we've been trying to fight this war with them and have done everything we can to spend many, many tens of billions of dollars. I think it's up now to $100 billion, funding the Ukrainian war machine, where we are literally at war with Russia. And we have, part of that was to sanction Russia and to remove Russia from SWIFT, which is the international clearing agency for financial transactions, and to sanction all of their banks. So what did Russia do? They increased their trade with China, with Iran, and with the countries that are part of the Belt and Road Initiative with China, 150 of them, and they solidified their position within BRIC. And the Russian economy hasn't missed a beat. In fact, it's stronger than it was. And now trading partners that America had that were doing business in dollars are doing business in rubles.
Yeah.
This was one of the greatest miscalculations in the history of humankind. And we were on it. We talked about this going back into 2013. Did a series of radio shows on it. The combination of those things, all that has to happen now, and the linchpin is Saudi Arabia, and the Crown Prince despises Biden in the United States. Despises him with a passion. You know, when Biden said, I tried to get them to lower oil prices and give us more oil during the period we were having sanctions on Russia, where the world's oil prices were skyrocketing, and he said, that's why I'm going to Saudi Arabia, and though I told you I would never do business with him. That was not why he was there, and the Saudis told us that was not why he was there. When he said, that's what we talked about, Saudi said, no, he never even mentioned it. You know why he was there? He begged the Saudis not to become part of BRIC. Because if the Saudis joined BRIC, It's over.
Wow. Wow.
24 hours, it's gone. The United States ceases to exist as a viable economy. That fast. We can't borrow money. We get into hyperinflation. Interest rates go crazy. Do you know that right now where the government is reporting, 9% inflation? They change the way they calculate inflation to get that number, and they leave out the two top inflationary items that affect families. So based upon the way that inflation was calculated in the 1980s, the inflation rate in the United States is 17%.
Mm-hmm.
That's damn near hyperinflation.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you know it when you go to the market. You see it, you know it. So the Saudis have now signed deals with Russia and China to replace the United States in their defense. That was the entire incentive for Saudi Arabia using the dollar as the exclusive reserve currency to buy oil and gas. The moment Saudi Arabia announces, and they will, that we are now part of BRIC as our most OPEC nations, the United States economy is no longer viable. So, I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm not telling you that there's an Armageddon coming. In fact, let me go to some good news in the midst of the bad news. And, by the way, Yahweh is very clear. The world's going to become a very difficult place to live.
Yes.
And we don't have a lot of time for it to crumble. So it's important for people to know that the politics and the religions and the culture and all the things that you have thought are a constant and will be there tomorrow as they were today, no, they're not. And you have a very short time to get to know Yahweh and take advantage of what he's offering. I have spent the last couple of weeks doing something I have never done before, something I never thought I would ever do. I was tuned into it a bit when I wrote this last volume. It's the largest volume, the longest by pages volume of any in the Yada Yahowah series on the book of Daniel. And having recently completed it, I learned that the majority of Daniel is not true. And that there are portions which are true, but only because they were actually delivered by real prophets, the lead of which was Dode, who was miscast as Gabriel. And then Elia is the second voice of that. There's also a voice of Michael. But all three of the supposed angels, they're not angels at all. They're men. Anyway, I became accustomed there to doing something I had never done before, which is to take a book that is supposedly part of the quote-unquote Bible that people believe was inspired by God and rip it to shreds. And I want to tell you, Daniel was no prophet. In fact, he was a disgusting human being. So, my focus now, having written 24, 25 volumes, is to focus on future events because we have so little time. So I figured, all right, let's jump into Ezekiel. Right? That's where the Magog War is presented. And what I've always said is I need to translate, very carefully scrutinize Ezekiel to determine whether or not there's one war or two wars being fought between now and the time that Yahweh and Dode return.
Right.
And so the question is the battles that are waging or being waged around Jerusalem, are they the same as the quote-unquote Magog War? And the Magog War, you'll find out that, Magog is mentioned several times. One, it's mentioned just as a name of a person in Genesis, having nothing to do with the Magog as a region of the earth, or Gog as a person. It's mentioned also in Chronicles, but again, it's It's an individual just happens to be by that name that's related to another person who is well known. The Magog War is only in two places, Ezekiel and Revelation.
Yep.
But I'm here to tell you that without equivocation, no part, none, absolutely nothing in Ezekiel is true. Ezekiel is not a prophet. The book of Ezekiel is completely and totally demonic. The depictions of God are of Satan. And everything that is said in the book is satanic. And the theme of the book through the first, and I've translated, I think, through 17 chapters of the book of Ezekiel. You can summarize it all into the Lord hates Jews. The Lord's goal is to kill every Jew, but he wants to torment them before he kills them. And it's only after he torments them and kills them that they're going to recognize that he, the Lord, is Yahweh. So you can't even translate Yahweh's name. You can't even transliterate it in the book because it is Satan saying that he's going to kill and torment Jews until they acknowledge that he is God. The two books that were allegedly written in Babylon are Babylonian. So, what that means is there's no millennial temple. It means that the book of Revelation that I've questioned for so long picked the wrong prophet to plagiarize, and is not true. It also means that there is no Magog War, no millennial temple, and most people don't know this, scholars do, but Ezekiel contradicts the Torah with reckless abandon. There are considerably fewer Moed Mikre, and the menu for the Moed Mikre changed considerably. The land allocated to the 12 tribes in the borders of Israel changed considerably. There are many, many variations and contradictions of the Torah. One of the most outstanding is that there is no Kippurim. And guess why there's no Kippurim? If the Lord of Babylon gets his way, there isn't a single Jew going to be alive to reconcile his relationship with Yahweh. So we do have one thing to look forward to. There will not be a Magog War. That does not mean that there aren't Muslims acting badly. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad has now partnered with Hamas to create the Islamic terrorists that thought it would be fun to blow up the bodies, to put shrapnel bolts and glass marbles in the bodies of almost 30 Jews, killing one. They have found him. He has confessed to the crime, of course. Allahu Akbar, he thought he did a really good thing. He said that his family was the ones that convinced him that he should go off and do this. They introduced him to other members of the family who were in the Pakistani Islamic Jihad, and they took him over to Gaza and to work with Hamas to brush up on his bomb-making skills. It is
that's disgusting.
And of course, a member of the Knesset would have us believe that the occupation is reaping the price of its crimes against the Pakistanians. It is amazing. All the while, the United States has General Mark Milley has come out and says, that if we keep on giving tens of billions of dollars of our best weapons to the Ukraine, they're going to win that war. And we're going to continue to supply them with weapons for as long as it takes. So what's going to happen if he is right and the Russians failed in their conventional war in the Ukraine? Do you think they're going to pull out, go back into Russia and say, oh, gee, we're really sorry. But we don't hold any animosity against the United States for killing our soldiers and for equipping the Ukrainians with tens of billions of dollars of weapons. No, we don't have any animosity, and we're just going to go back and we're going to apologize and say we were wrong.
Forget and forget.
Yeah. Or are they going to deploy nuclear weapons?
Of course.
The answer is so easy that it's amazing that people can't figure it out. You know, neither Fakistanians nor Jews are playing in the World Cup that's over in Qatar. And an amazing thing. I mean, the Qataris don't have a population that's capable of supporting the number of stadiums necessary for this. So the whole thing is just nothing but a show and tell boondoggle. They bribed their way into getting the award, and they bring over 30,000 workers from other countries because the Qataris themselves don't want to work, and 6,000 of them die in the horrific conditions that they were forced to live and work. And there seems to be no remorse by FIFA. If you're a soccer fan, shame on you. But there have been protests. Yeah, the protests have Fakistanians waving their Fakistanian flag, telling the world that Jews are the occupiers of their own land, by the way, and that it rightfully belongs to them. Truly amazing. Hey, but I do have, for you King fans, I do have some good news. Yep. Ivy League giant Princeton, which charges $80,000 a year for tuition, now has a series of classes which include black and queer, leather, black leather, and BDS culture, that, the F word, and the public body. You can take BDSM culture classes along with Black Lives Matter and Queer and Leather at Princeton University. I thought you needed to know. And what's good about that is that there's fireworks being shut off for reasons I do not know outside my window. Looks like they're being shut. Asher, please. Asher, please. Yes, I have a full-on fireworks show going on outside of my window. The fireworks are less than, I would say, 300-400 yards away.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So it must be Thanksgiving that they decided. Oh, goodness, yes. The world is crashing down, and now I have fireworks. And my Asher is barking at them, and my Wookiee dog has got his leg between his tail between his legs, and is sitting now in my lap saying, "Please save me." All right, that's enough. That is.
Okay.
Oh no! Oh, he's shaking like a leaf. Poor kid.
Poor little guy.
Yeah, poor guy. All right, so. By the way, the last time they did this, my boat, which is in the marina, cost me several $1,000s to scrape the burnt residue of fireworks off, because last time, this time, they chose to shoot them from the beach with the prevailing wind going right over the marina. But no, they haven't learned their lesson. But the good news is the marina is owned by a Mormon, so you know that he is an honorable man. Oh, yes, indeed. Okay. We're going to return to the book of Hosea. Hosea is probably the book. In fact, I would take where probably. If you're Jewish and you want to know why the relationship with God has been so crummy, why you are allegedly the chosen people, and every place you turn, things don't look like you were chosen for the wrong thing. Why is it that the world hates you, and yet you're supposed to be this exemplar of righteousness from a God whose name you don't even know? The answer to that question is presented brilliantly in the book of Hosea. We are towards the end now of the second chapter in our review, covered the beginning chapters. And to convey this message, Yahweh is on a theme, and the theme that he is using is that of a whore. He asks his prophet Hosea to marry a temple prostitute, and actually, there's really no concept of marriage in the Torah, but nonetheless, he said, go and
have a date.
Go and do it with a temple prostitute. Her name was Gomer. And the reason for that is God wanted Hosea to have empathy, to understand what it was like to try to have a relationship with Israel. I mean, Israel is the country that they didn't get 100 feet away from the pursuing Egyptians before, rather than thanking Yahweh, they built a golden calf to honor the gods of the country that had tormented them. And all along the way, they worked tirelessly to figure out how is it that we can go about antagonizing the God who saved us and liberated us. So, Hosea, and he specifically asked Hosea to marry this temple prostitute so that when he speaks to Israel, his message has emotion, that it has grit, it has a bite that is beyond what simply repeating the words of Yahweh would otherwise convey. It is why Yahweh always speaks through men and women. God has not lived in our bodies and not experienced, what it really is like to be stuck in three dimensions. And yet he wants to have this relationship with us. So when he tried to speak directly to us, he did it both with Adam and Chawah. Did not work out very well. Then he tried to do it again with the children of Israel during the Yatsa Exodus. And they begged him, said, no, we don't want to hear your voice again. Don't ever talk to us again directly. And God said, yeah, I understand. I do need to tone it down. And so the answer was that he would exclusively speak through individuals such as Moshe, Shamuel, Dod, Yashayah, Yirmiyah, and, of course, Hosea. And these individuals help to provide a perspective and a degree of kind of pathos to God's testimony that helps resonate with us. And Hosea is just a marvelous example. So if Jews want to understand why their relationship with God is so screwed up, why those who are pretending to speak for God, the Haredim, are the most colossal, absolute morons on earth playing religious rap, who clearly don't have a clue as to who God is, how is that possible? Well, the answer is in Hosea. Hosea 2:11 reads. This is actually 2:10 and 11. However, at this time, right now, I am revealing, this is Wa'ata Galah. I am, for the foreseeable future, causing her to be exposed, uncovering that which is associated with her stupidity and her foolish lewdness and shame, her senseless and disgraceful conduct, from the actionable root of Nabal to be ignorant and irrational, despicable and despised, in the sight of her most intimate lovers and passionate desires. And no individual shall save her out of my hand. Then I will observe the Shabbat by causing a cessation of all of her merry celebrations, her festival feasts, her new moon observances, her approach to the Shabbat, her designated celebrations. Now, this is a really insightful statement. So, first of all, it's God saying that the religiosity of his people has caused them to behave like prostitutes. They're trading money for for feigned affection, and they're looking for love in all the wrong places, and that where their stupidity really shines is among each other. They're not being stupid with God because they don't even know who God is. They're being stupid and lewd and shameful with one another. Boy, if you just look at the activities of the Haredim, that's exactly what we see. And he says, no individual is going to save her out of my hand. I'm not trying to save the Haredim. I'm not trying to save progressive Israelites or Jews. I can't. They're way too passionate about their politics and their religion to ever be open-minded, rational and reasonable. Can't be reached. But there are some 20% of Israelites that fall between the left and right extreme that can be reached. And I've devoted 21 years now of my life to expressly that purpose. And while I'm not the one saving them, Yahweh is, I can at least point those who are willing to listen to him in the right direction. Then there's a very interesting use of Shabbat. Shabbat, we talked about this, Kirk, before the program began.
Yeah.
Shabbat is the only Hebrew noun that I'm aware of that is not defined by its verbal root. But it clearly is not. And what we have to wonder is the verbal root of Shabbat wrong? And that Shabbat is a celebration of the promise associated with the seventh day. The seventh day is Stuka, where after we have benefited from Pesach and eternal life and Matzah and being perfected and Koram being adopted into God's covenant family, and Shabuah, where we are enriched and we're empowered and enlightened by God, so that on Towrah we can be effective witnesses, warning the world about the kinds of things that are going to happen, as we did in the beginning of this show, and also sharing with them, as we are now, the path home, that a reasonable number, hopefully many, not likely, fouled with Yahweh, accept him by name, understand the terms and conditions of his covenant on Yom Kippurim in year 6,000 Yah, when he returns with the Messiah, David. That is our calling, and where that is with Sukkah, where we get to camp out with Yahweh here on earth for 1,000 years as the earth is restored to the conditions experienced in Eden. So the Shabbat speaks of that end result of the seventh day and the promise of seven. It speaks of us returning to Eden and God's promise to take us back there. And so this says, I shall observe the Shabbat, but the verbal root speaks of by causing a cessation of all. I'll put an end to, stopping, removing every one of her celebrations, her festival feasts, her new moon observances, and her approach to the Shabbat, and all of her designated celebrations. Now, Christians wanting to support the Pauline doctrine of the Torah is condemns, and that the Torah was nailed to the cross and no longer has any value, and we shouldn't be stuck with any of those, and those things are all Jewish celebrations. We'll look at this statement and say, see, that's proof. But no, exactly the opposite. Pesach, Matzah, Shabuah, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, as well as the Shabbat, are Yahweh's. They don't belong to Yisrael. They don't belong to Yahudim Jews. They're Yahweh's. That's it. They are Yahweh's. So this condemnation, this cessation is of the Jewish celebrations.
What you mean?
And if you look at them, the Jews celebrate Pesach as if they were Cain. Everything goes on the plate except lamb. Only of vegetables. They don't even celebrate matzah anymore. They don't even speak of it. All they will do is say, we're going to play a game with the shemat, the yeast, and we're going to give it to the Gentiles for safekeeping. They don't care anyway. They're going to die anyway. What do we care about them? And we'll just take it back after Passover is over. So Passover becomes the 7-day celebration, and matzah is only a missing ingredient during the celebration of Passover. Bikurim means nothing to them. They have no idea that it means firstborn children, those who are born into the covenant family, or that David is the Bokor, the firstborn son of God. They don't celebrate Shabuah anymore because it became the Christian Pentecost and don't understand the value of being enlightened and enriched and empowered by God. Towrah they turned into Rosh Hashanah, the Babylonian head of the year. Somewhere in there they threw in Purim from the book of Esther, which is another one that's not inspired because of Esther's workings with, I guess it was with Xerxes, convincing him not to carry through this plot to wipe out the Jews. It's a complete myth. None of it happened. It's not true. The book is trash. Purim is meaningless. And then they've added Hanukkah based upon the Maccabees, because the great miracle of the Maccabees, who, by the way, cost many, many Jews their lives. The miracle of the Maccabees was that the oil lamp lasted longer than they had anticipated. Therefore, their menorah is not Yahweh's menorah, just as their festivals are not Yahweh's festivals. Their menorah has 9 candles. Look at any menorah. Yahweh's has 7. Yeah. Details like this matter.
Yes,
and so, Yom Kippurim, Kippur means to reconcile. The Kipporah is the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. And so the whole idea of Kippurim, which is the day Yahweh is returning with Dod, is that Yisrael and Yehudah will be reconciled together and then restored in their relationship with Yahweh. It is the last chance for Jews. The last. And they have turned that day into a day of affliction, where they afflict their souls, the opposite of reconciling with God. And the Haredim, to show their great understanding, abuse chickens by twirling them over their heads. That's how despicable the religion has become. And so their festivals are putrid. And that's why God says, I'm going to put an end to them. Now, the new moon and Shabbat observances, by the way, those are the observances that Ezekiel, who's inspired by the Lord of Babylon, who is also known as Satan, where did Yahshua tell us, 14th chapter, that Satan was going to rise and establish his position such that he was worshipped over the Most High God.
Yep.
Babylon. Yahweh warned us exactly what was going to happen in Babylon. And so in the book of Ezekiel, no, you don't have, I think 4 of the 7, the Moed Mikre are gone, and particularly Kippurim. The Jews can't celebrate it. And but it's replaced. Guess what it's replaced with? New moon observances and a Shabbat observance that is an annual event that has a specific menu. Isn't that great, huh?
Yeah, boy.
So this is inspired by God. Hosea is clearly a prophet, and he is saying that communicating Yahweh's message, and Yahweh is saying, I am so disgusted by Judaism that I will eliminate everything that they're doing. So how do you like those apples? The Shabbat is, as I've shared earlier, and we talked about briefly before the show, is the outlier among Hebrew words. While most nouns are defined by their verbal root, their actionable root, the seventh day is a special case, and that is because the title itself is actionable. Rather than a day to do nothing, as the case of, look at Rabbinic Judaism, they must have, I bet they have over 1,000 laws on how to turn this day into a nightmare. And this new government wants to impose it so that everyone has to observe it their way, which makes it the most difficult day of the year.
Yeah.
Instead of being the most onerous and religious day of the week, Yahweh wants this time set apart to enjoy our relationship. I don't know about you guys, but you're both in, loving family and spousal relationships. Do you enjoy your spouse by ignoring her and doing nothing?
Hardly.
No.
It doesn't work. Therefore, upon Yahweh's return, he is going to be Shabbating by celebrating the seventh day, beginning on the Shabbat of Sukkah, Friday at sunset, 7th, 2033. That is your 6,000 Yah. Yes, Jews, you have been misled by Maimonides that had this fixation on the number 19 and came up with the most harebrained idea as to the timeline, and he was most assuredly wrong, and anybody that would read what he wrote and why he wrote it would recognize that he's wrong. It is not difficult to establish Yahweh's timeline. The first 4 Moed Mikre were fulfilled in year 4000 Yah, which was 33 CE, and the final 2 will be fulfilled 40 Yobel thereafter in 2033. That is your 6,000 Yah. And God's going to celebrate his return by eliminating all traces of Judaism. Now, that does not say, we are not black Hebrew Israelites here, heaven forbid. That's maybe the new dumbest religion in the world. And one of the most dangerous, too, because they make asinine claims in a very anti-Semitic tone. And blacks are going crazy over this. They're marching in New York with their fancy little outfits. They look just like idiots. Chanting, which if you're marching chanting, you are an idiot. And they, watch out, Jacob, we're the real Jews. Why doesn't somebody bother to read what Yahweh has to say about Israel? Like in the book of Hosea. The last thing you want to be is to be Israel and to be religious. Listen, it's great to be a Israelite if you're in the covenant with Yahweh and not religious. But if you're religious, that is the last thing you want to be. But and of course, they blame Jews for selling them into slavery when, in fact, if it wasn't for Jews, there would have been no civil rights movement. The civil rights movement in America was a Jewish operation from beginning to end. They actually created organizations that had Christian names because they knew in America that if Jews were sponsoring them, people would rebel against. Yeah, they created Christian names, Jews did, to support the emancipation of blacks in America. And even Martin Luther King's speech was written by a Jew.
Yes.
So to blame Jews for your enslavement, when in fact the Jews have been the most enslaved people in the history of humankind, is officially brain dead. But here we have Yahweh saying, I'm going to eliminate all traces of Judaism, Do not think for a moment that means that Christianity or Islam or any other religion is going to survive. It will not. There was no religion in Eden. There will be no religion upon Yahweh's return. He despises religion, all of them. He has a lot to say that is critical of Christianity, but the religion that troubles him the most isn't Christianity or Islam, even though they are both anti-Semitic and both false. It is Judaism, because Judaism has done more harm to Jews than Christianity and Islam combined.
Yes.
So all of the religions, celebrations, including the perverted ways the Hasidic observe the Moed, Kippurim will never again be a day of atonement, a time to degrade and afflict oneself. And never again will chickens be tortured by perverted Jews. The rules rabbis have imposed to make the Shabbat so burdensome and laborious will be eliminated, so that the covenant's children can flourish with their father. But let there be no mistake. Yahweh is not eliminating any part of his plans for his people. His Shabbat, Chag, Moadeem, will be observed and celebrated forevermore. Ezekiel was wrong. It is only Israel's, her corruptions that are being rebuked and removed. Regarding his Moed Mikre is that they are set apart, they are his, and they are eternal. Now, Yahweh creates, and truly, Baal, the Lord, perverts. Yahweh cannot corrupt, and Baal cannot create. That is why Satan counterfeits. It is why the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam reflect aspects of Yahweh's message, but as in a mirror, in reverse. Left is now right, right is now wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The grapevines which produce wine and are rooted in the land are symbolic of eternal life. The fig tree is a metaphor for Israel. When it is healthy, its fruit is considered to be as sweet as honey. When it shrivels, it is a sign of impending distress and divine judgment on a weakened and dying nation. This is Hosea 2:12. I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, whereof she has said, these gratuities are for me, because my sexual partners and lovers have given them to me. However, I will cause them to be a thicket of tangled undergrowth, and the animals of the land shall devour them. This is symbolic. God is simply saying that the fruit of the land, Jews have claimed as their own, that this is their rightful payment for slutting around and acting religious clergy in the world by 3 times the next level of clergy. And so they claim, well, we've earned our wages. These are our gratuities. And God says, no, I'm going to shrivel them up, and they're going to be a tangled thicket of undergrowth and going to be devoured.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't have gone so quickly. I know, Kirk, you studied Shabbat. Was there something you wanted to add to it, or any of these words we've covered thus far?
No, basically it was a struggle. And I don't think I've ever spent so much time on a word that I thought I knew, on the different shading of it also. And I did read where it's not explained by using the verbal root. It was quite a conundrum for me, because I can look at the letters and I can see, and I've done so many words for so long. I know there are dark sides and light sides to everyone. There's shading to it, and in the context of this, it is a real. He's really being rough. I mean, like I told you, I just reminded myself that the chapters it says no mercy. It's entitled No Mercy.
Yeah. Shabbat is a word that because listen, religious Jews define themselves by their kosher diet and by their observance of Shabbat according to rabbinic law, and they get all the millions of things that they cannot do from the verbal root, which means to cease or stop. But Shabbat is one of those words where there is a message in Shabbat, which is the basis of Shabbat, that is far more powerful than the verb. And the Shabbat means two things. One is to promise, an oath or a vow, a promise, an oath or a vow, and seven.
Understood.
That's why I shared with you. The single most important part of Shabbat is that it conveys the promise of seven, and the promise of seven is the benefits of observing as they were intended the seven moed mikre, which lead to camping out with God for all time. That is the best way to interpret Shabbat as opposed to the verbal root.
Okay.
So I will take an inventory and record against her for the time and association with the Balaam, the Lord's, because she blew smoke, burned incense, and made offerings to them, and she was adorned, plain religious dress-up, with her ornamental rings and circular objects. Bejeweled, she went after her lovers, pursuing her desires and illicit relationships, and she ignored and then forgot me, prophetically announces Yahweh. Now, if you want absolute proof of this, read the Zohar, read the Talmud, read the Mishnah. In fact, go and read the Jewish Publication Society's Tanakh.
Yeah.
See if you can find Yahweh's name. You won't. They have not just forgotten about him, they've annulled him.
I read several of those texts, and it's not there.
No. They have outlawed the mention, the use of Yahweh's name. So God says, I'm going to take an inventory and a record against you because, well, you still speak of the Lord. And they do. But the Lord is Baal. Plural is Baalem. The Lord. Baal. To describe Satan is because Satan wants to control, to lord over, to be the master.
Be obeyed.
He is the Lord of Babylon. He is the Lord of religion. He's the one that wants you to fear him, to worship him, to bow down before him. Yahweh's none of those things. He is our Father. He doesn't want us to bow down to him. He instead wants us to stand up. He wants to lift us up so we can stand and walk with him.
Amen.
He doesn't want us to worship him. He wants to engage in a meaningful and enjoyable family relationship with us. The covenant is a family. It's not a religion. So Satan's desire to lord over men so that he is seen above God is the opposite of what God wants. Rather than us lifting God up in some kind of praise or prayer, God said, that's stupid. You can't do that. And it's counterproductive. You know, the whole idea was I created you to be part of my family so I could lift you up as if you are my children.
Duh.
And so Baal is the antithesis of who Yahweh is and the relationship he wants to have with us. So, and Israel, we went through this whole thing of what Eliah had to do to eliminate the king and queen's fascination with Baal and with Asherah, the queen of heaven and mother of God that Roman Catholics have fashioned into the Madonna and child.
Yeah.
And so God is saying, you blew smoke to him. You made offerings to them. You associated with them. You played religious dress-up to them. God is not a fan of religious dress-up. And then you have your round circular objects, the round earrings, the round wedding rings, the halos you draw above your saints' heads, your Christmas wreaths, all of that stuff. Solar. It's the yarmulke, the kippah, that religious Jews will. It's a circular disc, symbolic of the sun god. Bejeweled, she went after her lovers, pursuing her desires in an illicit relationship. What God is saying here is also subtle. Religion exists largely because of women, even though they're subjugated. Women have no rights in Judaism. That's the reason why the religious parties are trying to get a ban on the court order for equal rights. They want to have all of their events and be able to subjugate women and not be in violation of anti-discrimination laws. You know, in Islam, a woman is worth nothing. A man can beat her, kill her, torture her, rape her, whatever he wishes to do, and it's A-OK with Allah. One is raped in an Islamic country. She is the one who is beaten to death, not the rapist. Yes. And the same thing, by the way, is true with the Hindu religion. So they're not much better on it. And, of course, Paul said that men can lord over women. Women do not fare well in religion, and yet they're the reason religion exists. If they would stop supporting the religion and stop using their womb as a tool to manufacture more religion would stop immediately. And it's never more true than in Judaism, where women have absolutely no rights, and yet they capitulate to all of the disgusting demands that are placed on them by the Haredim. And they're turning their wombs into manufacturing plants to make more religious with, 7 children per womb. God's saying you're selling your womb for this illicit religious relationship. And yet, in the process, you forgot about me. And there's only one way, to benefit in the end. There's only one way for Israelites, Yehudim, Jews, to reconcile the relationship with Yahweh. It's by accepting the terms and conditions of the covenant, by attending the 7 Moed Mikra, by coming to know Yahweh, understand what he is offering, and accepting what he is asking in return. And the first step of that is to understand who he is. Now, just knowing his name is not enough, but it's a good first step.
Yeah.
But there isn't a religious Jew or a progressive, liberal Jew who will even say his name. And if you bring up his name among a Roman Catholic or a Protestant or Christian or Orthodox Christian, they will
he's got lots of names.
Fume at you. But they'll call their God the Lord. They'll refer to Jesus as if he's God. They'll parade around under the symbol of a dead God on a stick. I was reading an article today that in the United States, about 30% of businesses and HR departments think it is appropriate to be anti-Semitic. They either says they're the owners of the business encourage anti-Semitism, or they justify being anti-Semitism because Jews have too much power, Jews make too much money, Jews are too annoying, or Jews killed Jesus. That's anti-Semitism is so prevalent that 30% of businesses and their HR department not only acknowledge that they're anti-Semitic, but justify being anti-Semitic and thinking it's good. We don't want to be around all those Jews.
Openly. That's all done openly. My God.
Openly. Now, understand, there's an enormous difference between hating Jews because of you don't like the race. If you hate Jews because you dislike the race, you have your conspiracy theories, then understand that you are antagonizing God, and
Yes.
that your fate is at best to die. And if you promote it, you'll spend eternity in Sheol, which is hell. So it is a very, very costly mistake. It is not an innocent crime. God takes it very seriously. But it's another thing entirely to do what Yahweh is doing, which is to say, I hate Judaism. In fact, the most loving thing you can do for a Yahud Jew is to expose and condemn Judaism, because there's nothing that has separated Jews from God more than the religion of Judaism. So it's a very important distinction. And it's a distinction the rabbis don't want you to make. They literally want to define Jew as an ultra-Orthodox religious person. It's not about ethnicity anymore. It's about religiosity. And this is why God is so frustrated. Literally, God's animosity is with the religion of his people, and it's palpable. The most prevalent and repeated theme throughout the Torah and prophets is God speaking out against what is now known as Judaism on behalf of Jews. And this statement's no exception. Think of that for a moment. The Torah, prophets, and Psalms, referred to as the Tanakh, has one theme that is more prevalent than all others, overwhelmingly so. And it's God's animosity against Judaism on behalf of Jews. Pretty amazing. So, Yahweh is exposing and condemning Israel's attraction to, its worship of false gods. Whether they are blowing smoke or plain religious dress-up, God is disgusted by what the rabbis have done and what Judaism is doing to denigrate that the Assyrians, the Philistines of old, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Roman Catholics, the Europeans as Nazis, and the Muslims, and now progressives, are denigrating God's people. And that they have tormented them and tortured them and enslaved them for thousands of years. And yet in all of that time, nothing has done more harm to Jews than Judaism. Each time I consider what Rabbi Samson, remember we read last week what Rabbi Samson had to say in his essay on prophecy, the Geiger counter rings in Israel, and how the only prophets today are rabbis. And I'm here to tell you there are no prophets today. There haven't been a prophet in 2,500 years. Not one. Malachi was the last prophet. You know, I've gotten to know Yahweh pretty well. I've written a lot about what he had to say. But I'm just a witness. The last prophet was Malachi. And there has been none since. These men, the rabbis, the whole lot of them, including Paul, who was a rabbi, they all sound alike. They're among the most disgusting individuals the world has ever known. And just look at them. Oh God! When you know the venom that flows out of their mouths, the disgusting things that they write, your view of them will be exactly as God's. Unlike the infamous Gentiles who were savages, Yehudim are guilty of taking Yahweh's words and his gifts and squandering them, perverting them, and then tossing them at the feet of their rabbis and other false gods. There will be a judgment day. Let me assure you of that. And being in the company of rabbis will be akin to being among the prophets of Baal when he or they went against Eliah. So I'd recommend running away before your soul is irreparably singed. Or if you prefer, you can do as the Haredim have done. Pretend to be Torah observant, even righteous, and ignore everything Yahweh has revealed in opposition to Judaism, and see how that turns out for you. Some will disavow them, leave their crippling world forevermore. And this transitional statement, Yahweh is pointing the way back home. He is talking about the transition from Azab to Bereth. The door is open. The only question is, are you? Hosea 2:14. Therefore, and by contrast, long thereafter, Lachen. Behold, Hannah, pay attention. Knowing that she has been deceived, I will leave the way open to persuade her, should she become open-minded. Anoky, pathah, he. Since she is easily seduced and enticed, having been readily misled and gullible, I will provide ample space. At that moment, I will walk with her to ponder the word, even in the place where these statements have been questioned, such that I speak words to her heart, making an impression upon her judgment and her thinking. Beginning then and there, I am prepared to give to her so that she can approach the vineyards, the vine dresser, her garden, and the resulting fruit. The valley of Achor, of troubles, will become an open doorway of hope, of confidently, I should say, expecting a good and beneficial future. And then and there, along with the name, she will respond with the answer, as in the days of her youth, as in the day when I lifted up and she ascended out of the land of Mitzrayim, which are the crucibles of political and religious oppression. Hosea 2:15. That's a lot to chew on.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But the difference between Yahweh and, for example, the Lord of Babylon in Ezekiel is that Yahweh will say, your religiosity has become frustrating. It's killing you. I want to compare it to a prostitute so that you come to appreciate why I dislike it so. Because my goal is to share words with you. I want to leave the way open for those of you who have been deceived, should you be able to be open-minded. I want to walk with you. I want to talk with you. I want to contemplate these great statements and questions together. Let's share words. Let's make good decisions. That's what God wants. That's what He's offering to you. Doesn't sound like too much to ask for. In fact, it sounds like everything He is requesting from you, Yisrael, is in your interest. He wants you to know, to understand, to be open to what He has to say. He wants you not to bow down and worship Him, but to walk with Him. Not to read the Talmud, but to ponder His words. He wants to speak. to your heart, wants to make an impression on you and your judgment and your thinking. He says, I am prepared. This is Yahweh speaking. I am prepared to give her what she needs to approach. Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, Shavuot, Teruah, and Kippurim leading to Sukkah. I am prepared to give her what she needs to approach. And then she can enter the vineyards, join the vine dresser, reap the fruit of that garden. And the valley of troubles will become an open doorway of hope and confidently expecting a good and beneficial outcome. It is sad for Jews that when they were tormented all of those years in Mitzrayim and the crucibles of human oppression that we call Egypt today, using the Greek word, that being liberated by God from Mitzrayim and being given this great gift of the Torah and the land of Israel, that the Jews chose to be unappreciative, to worship and speak of other gods. And then when the Assyrians came, the lesson was not learned. Troubles, but they continued to rebel. The Babylonians came, and the message still was not heard. The Greeks came. No change. 3 assaults by the Romans. Nope. They still listen to the rabbis over Yahweh. The Roman Catholic Church in 2,000 years of persecution. Nope. The Holocaust. Islamic terrorism. Nothing has been enough to get their attention. The valley of Achor, of troubles, is still where they roam. But God is saying, this time, you're going to look at and the whole world's going to be against you. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, and it is coming from every possible direction. Coming from right-wing conspiratorial wackos, coming from religious Christians and Muslims. It's coming from Black Lives Matter and from Black Israel, or Hebrew Israelites. Hard even to say that without choking on it. Coming from all directions. Coming from communists. Coming from fascists. And this time, the trouble will be overwhelming. And your religion and your politics are not going to save you. Your IDF is not going to save you. It's time to turn to Yahweh. He has left the door open. That doorway is called Kippurim, the day of reconciliations. Capitalized, expecting a good and beneficial future. Then and there, along with the name Washam, she will respond with the answer. What is the answer, Yahweh? The Moed Mikre, properly celebrated. Walk away from religion. Trust and rely upon Yahweh instead.
Yes.
Accept the covenant. Become part of God's family. Listen to the guidance of the Torah. Benefit from the insights provided by the prophets. It's an open book test. Respond with the answer. Go to yadayah.com. Yadayah.com means to know Yah. You'll find every one of these books on the shelf. They're all free in their entirety. You can read them on your smartphone, on your tablet, on your laptop, on a PC, or you can go to Amazon. And under the Yada Yahowah series, buy them all. And there's no royalty. We're not trying to profit from you. We want you to profit from us. It's all there for you. Yahweh's testimony, his name properly pronounced, terms and conditions of his covenant, the correct meaning and purpose of each of the Moed Mikre, his timeline, example after example, so that you can come to know him. It's all there along with the name, so that you will respond with the answer, and that you'll return as you were that brief moment when you were walking out of the crucibles of human oppression. This prophetic announcement opens with a fortuitous offer and a very provocative phrase. A way is being left wide open for reconciliation. Yahweh is even committed to walk beside Yisrael through it all. After exposing and condemning the beguiling and controlling aspects of the religion of his people, God is providing his alternative. We have been offered access to the truth, and that we've been given the freedom to choose, free will. Long after Judaism and its derivatives, Christianity and Islam, have seduced and deceived the gullible, Yahweh has opened a door for the open-minded to walk away from them and return to him. Now, he should have just given up on this. I mean, it's been 3,500 years of aggravation. But he hasn't. He's still standing at the door. He's holding it open for you, waiting for his children, should they be willing to walk with him and ponder his word at long last. But this opportunity, written as it was in the perfect conjugation, will not exist forever. This is your moment. Seize it. If Midbar, which was one of the words in that text, means wilderness, then Yahweh was promising to speak to his people even when they're separated from him in a lifeless and barren landscape. If Midbar is to mean desert, then Yahweh is communicating to, once again, and promising to draw his people out of the desolate world of religious oppression and into the promised land. A garden awaits. Eden beckons. But more than this, it is apparent that Midbar is comprised of the interrogatory mai, which means to question and contemplate, and dabar, which is the word of God. Therefore, in the midst of confusing religious claims, false pretenses, and rabbinic charades, rabbinic law, Yahweh will speak to the hearts and minds of those who are willing to listen. He will impress upon his people's thinking about what they need to know to restore their relationship with him. He's given us all of the information that's required to do that. Israel's vineyards will be reestablished, protected and groomed by an accomplished wine dresser. We're being invited back into God's garden, and we will be fruitful and flourish. The Emek Akor, the Valley of Troubles, has a pitak tagwa, a doorway of hope. After suffering through 3 millennia of depressions resulting from the profoundly cunning religious plot to deviate away from what God has conveyed, the children's troubles are finally over. Yahweh is providing a portal to an expansive realm, one without the controlling influence of Judaism. No Christianity, no Islam, no progressives. We have been given every reason to confidently expect a good and beneficial future. There is a reason to be optimistic, a way to move forward. That is the good news. It is at Achor that the Israelites who disregarded Yahweh's instructions at Jericho and stole things from the temples of Baal were exposed. They were judged and suffered the consequence. Some were stoned to death and then incinerated. Therefore, those who are finally willing to listen will find a day of reconciliation and a second chance at life. The doorway is being opened. It's available to pass through, paired to Anah. Anah is that exceedingly important word that the religions tend to corrupt. They will tell you that Anah means to afflict, and it can be defined that way, but that is a distant definition. The primary definition of Anah is to answer, to respond, to reply. God wants us to Anah, respond to Him. He is expecting that His people will Anah, reply to the invitation to meet on this day, which is Yom Kippurim. The Mikra are based on Kara, and Kara means to invite, to summon, to welcome, to greet. It's a day to read and recite, all from the verb Kara. Mm-hmm. These surviving and observant Israelites will be restored. They become God's children. They get to act like children, looking up to and adoring their Father. Yehudim will be free again. As surely as Yahweh brought His people out of the bondage of human oppression, religious and political, military and economic, in Mitzrayim, He will liberate them from the Babel of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Perhaps also, for those who have an open mind, some progressives may find truth palatable as well. But the first step is you have to walk away from your politics and from your religion. What is the first thing that Yahweh asked of Abraham? In fact, before he'd even talked to Abraham, he was well on the road out of Ur, Suma, and then incorporated into Babylon. He was walking away. And Yahweh reemphasized that over and over again. We must walk away from Babylon. Babylon means to confuse by intermixing. It means that truth and lies are woven together and commingled to create a counterfeit that misleads, that confuses, that confounds. It's a very troubling word, Babel, because it is also the basis of Bible. And the word itself is a compound. It means with Ba-Bel, the Lord. And the Lord is Satan. So much we can learn when our minds are open. We come to know the difference between the adversary who wants to lord over us, to control us, to have us be religious, to bow down, to pray, to worship, to believe, and Yahweh who wants none of those things. Doesn't want us to worship Him, doesn't want us to pray to Him, doesn't want us to bow down to Him, doesn't want us to believe Him. That's hard for people to grasp. But Yahweh wants His people, the Israelites, which means those who engage and endure with God, and Yehudim, which means beloved of Yahweh, to know Him. Yada, to know Him, to be familiar with Him, to acknowledge Him, to understand what He is offering, what He expects in return, to stand and walk with Him, to listen to Him and engage in conversation, to explore the universe with Him, to be His son and daughter, to be a friend, to be a companion. These things are the opposite of what the religious would have us do. We can't buy our way into forgiveness. We can't earn our way by being righteous. Look at who was Dode. By his own admission, he says, I have more flaws than hairs on my head, and yet God called him right, which means that he was correct and vindicated. And it's the Torah that has done this for him and will do it for us. So this is God's offer. If you're open, the door is open. But don't walk through it, trying to carry your religion or your politics with you. God's not going to accept it. He'll slam that door in your face, and you'll never get through. Walk away from them. They're lying to you. They're making a fool of you. Walk away from them. And then come to know Yahweh as he revealed himself. Trust and rely upon him. Closely examine and carefully consider the terms and conditions of his covenant relationship. Celebrate his moed mikre as they were intended. Walk along that path to Sukkah and enjoy what it means to camp out with our Heavenly Father as he intended. That's the message that he is conveying and that we're conveying. And there's no one we want to listen and capitalize more than his people, Yisrael and Yehudim. Well, I think we're at a good spot that we can stop. We're no longer broadcasting. We are still recording, but this is, I think, a good place for us to begin our program. A week from today, we are in Hosea, 2:16.
2:17.
I have. Unless I have missed something, Kirk or Dee, that you would like to add or want to critique me for sharing such doom and gloom at the beginning of the program.
I thought it was necessary. Yep.
Yeah, has anything changed in the Tablet of the Stones that when he said, you have to be away from this stuff to I can't be with you? Did that just go over everybody's head? I mean, I know that may sound simplistic, but it ain't changed the story from the start.
Yes.
Yeah.
God clearly hasn't changed his story. The reason he shares so much with us about Eden, the Garden of Eden, is that we understand that that's where we are headed. Those of us who capitalize on the covenant, and so it should be no surprise. There was no government. There was no police. There was no military. There was no economic system, no caste system. There was no subjugation.
Fun work.
No religion, no politics, no hierarchy in the Gan Eden. And yet there was work. If you are part of the entitled generation that thinks that the world owes you everything, your education, your housing, your food, your everything, and that you don't need to work for anything, you're not going to like living with Yahweh. Yahweh is a big fan of work. He thinks work adds value. It builds character. It creates something worthwhile. So, living in the garden isn't about running around and playing all the time. There is work to be done. We're going to make a better world. We're going to work together throughout eternity. In fact, creates a new heaven and earth, as we're told he will do, and Yashaya, we will be there as witnesses and as contributors.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does,
doesn't it?
For those, I want to just leave with one other thing, and that is that if you're a first-time listener or you've been listening and reading these books for a short period of time, hearing me tell you that Daniel is mostly a fraud. In fact, Daniel himself is a fraud. The only reason that the book of Daniel has some value is that Gabriel is actually David. And the voice at the end of the book is Elia, that is speaking to us, and Michael is the other witness of the last days. And so what those three men have to say is true. as recorded in the second half of the book, but everything else in the book is false. And to tell you that all of Ezekiel, from beginning to end, is untrue. In fact, counterproductive. That's tough to take. It's until you've come to know Yahweh, you've come to explore the translations that we're providing, you've come to think about and to challenge the commentary I've written and the insights that I've shared on these programs and in these books, which we've been doing now for 21 years. Until you have a foundation and you know who Yahweh is, it's poor for the newbies to try to understand who he is not. And I understand that it's more comforting for people just to say, well, if it's in my Bible, it must be the inspired word of God. Well, that's just not true. The entire Christian New Testament is trash. And there are many books in the Bible that are untrue. Daniel and Ezekiel happen to be two of them, but Song of Solomon is, Ecclesiastes is, Esther is. There are numbers of them. For the books the Bibles that have Enoch in them, that rubbish too. Yahweh gave us in the Torah a means to determine who was speaking for him and who was not. And he gave it to us for a reason. He expects us to use that tool to get to know him, and so that we can determine when it's God speaking and when this anti-Semitic rant that wants to kill. Well, there are places where he says, "I'm going to kill 5/3 of every Jew."
Yep.
Yeah.
What you're doing
it isn't enough to kill Jews a third. No, he wants to kill 5/3 of them, and even those that escape, that somehow are spared, he wants to torment and torture and degrade and then exterminate them as well. That is not the God of the Torah and prophets. No. That is the Lord of Babylon. And the Lord of Babylon is best served when there are no Jews. I would just caution you and say that, yes, we've been doing this for 21 years, so we've learned a lot and developed a very confident understanding of who Yahweh is. And with that, an understanding of who he is not. And we didn't jump into these two most recent conclusions arbitrarily. My relationship with Yahweh began with writing Prophet of Doom and Tea with Terrorists, where I proved conclusively that the Quran is the worst book ever written, that Allah was Muhammad's alter ego, and that Allah was modeled after Satan because Muhammad was demon-possessed. In addition to Prophet of Doom, which has been read by people all around the world, I wrote Questioning Paul. In fact, I've written that book 4 times, and the most recent iteration of it is 4 volumes long, and it systematically disproves the religion of Christianity and completely dismantles the credibility of the Christian New Testament. This book that we're sharing now on Hosea undermines the Talmud and Rabbinic Judaism by sharing what God shared with us. So we have been about spelling religious myths for a long time. So it's not the first time that we've encountered this. It's just the first time that we've had to prove that a book was not inspired that is accepted by many to be true. And in the case of Ezekiel and Daniel, 2 religions die with them being shown to be untrue, and for the enlightened, 3 religions die. Without Daniel, there is no Christianity because there's no justification for having a Christ.
Yep. And
so without Daniel, Christianity vanishes. And without Ezekiel, there is no Zohar. There is no, in fact, Zohar is actually a word that first appears in Ezekiel chapter 8. There is no Zohar. There is no Kabbalah. And without it, that's the heart of rabbinic Judaism. It disappears.
Yeah. Wow.
And, of course, Revelation is based largely on Ezekiel, and what it says is untrue. And it was one of only 2 books that had even the slightest possibility of having some value, and it disappears. Islam, because rabbis in Yathrib, now known as Medina, sold Muhammad Talmud readings. And part of the Talmud readings, they were fascinated, the rabbis, of course, with, and so they sold them Talmud readings that included stories of the Magog War and of Gog, and so they have been incorporated into the Quran in typical Mohammedan fashion, which is stupidly, but nonetheless they are there, and they're expecting a Gog to rise up in a Magog War, and it is just not going to happen. I am particularly relieved, by the way, on that, because it was always a wonder why there were going to be 2 wars, why they would be fought in different places and different times, how after God brings an end to one war, would there be any nincompoops on earth that would want to start a second war? And then so many of the countries that are listed that are going to be part of that federation are in places where it's just so unlikely. You know, the Caucasus region, it's so unlikely you're going to get people from there that are going to flood into Israel and sacrifice their lives to kill Jews. So it just didn't make any sense, and it was really impossible to try to coordinate what Yahweh says about Muslims flooding into Israel and numbers that exceed the bullets to hold them back, with the story of the Magog War. So
right.
I am relieved. I was expecting to go into the book to quantify and explain what was predicted, but I am certainly off the hook on that. Now my only job is to continue with the book long enough that I have worn everybody down, and I have been able to show that there's nothing in the book that's true. And I don't know how many chapters I need to go through before we say, okay, Uncle already, you proved the case. Let's move on. But without those 2 Babylonian books, all of the gobbledygook goes away. All the mysticism, all of the craziness, and you have one consistent story in the Torah and prophets that's told over 1,000 years. Just eliminate the
Daniel and
nonsense.
Ezekiel are the favorites of Christians.
Oh, yeah. Every prophet book writer, every author uses that.
Yep.
Wow.
And Kabbalists, so you're knocking several religions out of the water.
Yeah, it does. It's a good feeling to do that. I have to say that a couple of days ago I was talking to my wife and saying, I signed up for this job 21 years ago. I did my penance and wallowing in the malarkey of the Quran I did that for between 3 and 4 years. That was a long time to thoroughly explain away Islam and to prove that it was a terrorist manifesto, and to do so only using the Islamic scriptures. And clearly the years I spent exposing and condemning Paul and undermining Christianity, that wasn't a lot of fun either. It is fun translating Dod's Psalms. It's fun being part of the audience, and when you're analyzing what Moshe had to say to the people of Israel, it's really fun translating and contemplating the insights provided by Yahweh and Yirmiyah and Zechariah and Malachi. It's tremendous fun. Being in Babylon with these nincompoops, not so much fun. So I signed up for a lot of things. I've had a wonderful ride with Yahweh. This is not my favorite part. And because
we appreciate
I'm not
it.
learning who God is, all I'm proving is this is not God. And so I said, I'm ready to be done with this. And she kept on saying, yeah, you probably are, but it's been 2,500 years and no one's done it.
Yes.
If you don't do it, who is going to do it?
Yeah. I'm with Kirk. I'm very glad you're doing it.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yep. So anyway, I'll be grumpy for a while. It is. I'm just sorry. It's just like Yahweh. I mean, he comes across when he's dealing with the religiosity of Jews. He's grumpy. You can't blame him.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't have to enduring this. It's aggravating. So I'll be grumpy for a while, but fortunately, this is it. It'll be over. And I guess my one frustration is that I really tried to make sense of Ezekiel. So I wrote the first 3 chapters, but to do it, the only way I could do it was I had to. I went through and I highlighted the statements that could be translated in such a way as you could get a positive message from it. And skipped all the other nonsense. And so I went and translated them, and I wrote a commentary on them. And then I occasionally went to 1 or 2 verses either too soon or too late. And I say, wait a minute, this is just not true. And I was having such frustration with the appearances of God, because it's clearly satanic. I said, okay, we've got to go, and I've done this exactly the wrong way. So I had to go all the way to the beginning, redo everything I had done, and said, the purpose here is not to share the parts that could possibly be interpreted sensibly, because we're in Babylon. Babylon means you intermix truth and lies. And that's the only way you can deceive. A steady diet of lies isn't going to fool a fool. So you have to have some truth and lies intermingled to be an effective fraud. And so I said, what I've done is I've done exactly the opposite of what I should have done. So I had to go right back to the beginning and redo it. But I'm back into the 3rd chapter now, and I'm making some progress again. So
I felt this way about Yaakov. That was frustrating to me.
Yeah, that was another one that was a good challenge. That Yaakov is, but it wasn't the worst one for me. Abraham was the worst one for me. Yaakov is very often an example of bad behavior. Yaakov represents Yisrael, and Yisrael is wrong more than Yisrael is right, and so is Yaakov. Abraham pimped out his wife not once but twice, and so if you love women and you dislike men abusing women, Abraham's tough to take. So, but I was saying, okay, but here's the reality of the situation, Craig. He was the only one. He was the only one who was willing to walk away from Babylon and listen to me. And by the way, he married well. His wife was really sharp. She had her act together, and so that was my one option. So right time, right place, and I made the most of what I could do, and so God came to have a wonderful relationship with him, even though I look at him and say, "Oh, you idiot, you!" But thank goodness, it wasn't my responsibility. But that's part of the story that makes the translating in Yahweh's testimony interesting. Is that every character in the story is flawed, every single one.
All of them.
Yep. There's the only one who's like right 99.9% of the time is Moshe. Moshe's got character. He has stamina. He has intellect. He's even though he claims that he didn't speak well, he's a brilliant orator. magnificent thinker, a man of tremendous character. He's the one outlier of the group. He's right, even when he's not with Yahweh and defending his people for the right reason, risking his own life to defend his people. He's a man of character. When he first gets into Arabia and he watches the women at the well and they're being harassed by this raiding party. He's one 80-year-old guy, and yet he shoos them away. He stands up for the women and takes the risk. So even before he knew Yahweh, he was a man of character. But he's the one outlier. He's the guy that it's hard to find anything that's not lovable and righteous, right about him. Dode is of course Yahweh's favorite. Dode is Yahweh's favorite because he's passionate. He's aggressive. He's bold. He's courageous. He's brilliant. Dode's got the whole package, but with all of that comes a personality that is prone to be impulsive and occasionally make some really stupid statements and do some really dumb stuff. So
you gotta like the reason I like Dode so much is he always says the right thing about the right situation, even if the head finds out 3 minutes later that they were talking about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he really does some. He does some dumb stuff. Yes, but the purpose of that is to say, okay. So I'm going to give you an example of the best of humankind. The name is Dode, my beloved. I anointed him as the Messiah. I call him my son. I am his father. He is the shepherd. He is the branch. He is the Bakor, firstborn. He's the most set apart. He is the returning king. He's got it all, man. That is the ultimate resume. God himself wrote Dode's resume. It's a really good one. And yet, the man in the midst of doing brilliant things with his mashal and with his mizmor and with his life, he has some real clunkers. And the reason that that's important to us,
there's hope,
is that, even you and I can, indeed, we can. We can please, if Dode pleased Yahweh, we can please him.
Yeah, I have a chance. Small.
Yeah, if Dode can be right, we can be right. If Dode can lay it all out in song, we can write some pretty stirring lyrics as well. I often, because the wonderful job that my wife and Jackie have done, and the Proof Squad have done, getting these the books all together in the new format. I will often just grab a book and I'll open and I'll read it. And there are places in it where the turn of phrase, the insights will bring a tear to your eyes. I mean, you'll read it and say, "Yikes!" I mean, that's
Absolutely
amazing. Yeah, and I was almost in an out-of-body experience for me as I read these things. And,
right.
And there's 15,000 pages, and every page has something of value. Many that will change your life. Many that are unheralded. They have never been written before. And so it's amazing what Yahweh can do with flawed instruments.
Yep. You were talking earlier about...
sorry. Go ahead.
Craig had mentioned earlier about his negativity, and it's just, this is necessary. Not everything is pleasant, but when the Torah cuts away what's not good, and that's what you're doing. You're showing what Yahweh's message really contains and how to apply it. These books are... That is what you're doing. So the negativity doesn't bother me because I know what it's for and who it's for. And Yahweh talks about in Hosea 2:14 tonight. You read, the people have been deceived by the rabbis. And
yes, they have.
you're clarifying that deception, so it's not negative at all. It's vital.
It's saving.
Yeah. Yeah, we live in a world where Yahweh's words are very seldom contemplated. Very few people draw insights from them, know how to apply them to their lives, and that's the purpose of the Yada Yahowah series, is to help those who are open-minded come to know Yahweh, gain an appreciation for what he is offering, and understand what he is expecting in return. That is our gift, and it is all there at the Yada Yahowah site. We talk about it on these programs, really to draw your attention to the books. Yahweh has an overwhelming preference for the written word, and so do we. So I would encourage you to read them. I would, if you're a newbie to this program, I would start on with the first book, on Introduction to God, Volume 1, and read through that series on an introduction to God, and then read through what is 9, and if I ever finish the book on Ezekiel, it'll be 10 volumes of Yada Yahowah. They then followed by 5 on observations, and then 2 on coming home. And I would even encourage Jews to read the 4 volumes of Questioning Paul. Once you come to understand how Judaism conceived Christianity, and how Christianity came to be anti-Semitic, and came up with the concept of replacement theology, the whole mythos of Christianity, when it's exposed and condemned using Yahweh's testimony, I think is just a great confidence boost for Jews.
Yep.
So I think that it's probably could be as important as any book in the whole series, or books, because there's 4 of them, for Yehudim to read, to understand how Christianity came to be and why you ought not be afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So anyway, well, thank you for all for listening. Well, I was glad the voice did sort of hang out. We survived even Wookiee survived.
How's Wookiee, by the way?
Yeah, the fireworks show. Yeah, I think Wookiee stopped shaking now. Wookiee's asleep in the Wookiee bed at my feet. And Asher is as well. So all is well here on the Caribbean island of St. Croix. I wish you guys the best in Florida and in California. Good night.
Thank you.
Happy Shabbat.
Good night. Shabbat Shalom.
Good night, y'all. Shabbat Shalom.
Bye.